Mute. Okay, we're recording. So it's 7:02. We'll call the meeting of the Transportation Advisory Committee to order, September 6th, 2022. And let's see, first order of business. Do we have any minutes to review and approve? Phil, Aaron?
We do not.
Okay.
Technical difficulties, but we're
I heard
on the way to solving that, I think.
Okay. Let's see, moving on, chair report. I don't have too much to report. I think became aware of the Concord Academy proposal for redevelopment of the West Campus, and saw that there was item of interest in their plan. So Aaron has asked them to participate in tonight's meeting. I hope most of you had a chance to look at their documents on the ZBA website, webpage, specifically the parking plan. And that's what we're going to be talking about when we discuss things with him. And let's see, what else? I have nothing else. Aaron, is there anything I'm missing?
I don't think so, not for your update.
Okay. Great. Yeah, Aaron's the one who does all the work, so we'll hear from her.
Just some of it.
Okay, so moving on to Concord Academy West Campus redesign transportation discussion. As I said, I became aware of the plan. I sit on the Natural Resources Committee, and the Concord Academy came there to present the natural resources aspects of their plan. So I became aware of what they were doing and did some research on it, and realized there was this topic of particular interest related to their parking plan. So here we are this evening to learn about it, to share with them any questions, concerns we have, get answers, figure out what we want to do going forward. So Aaron, do you want to introduce who we've invited, or the people?
Well, I'm Don Kingman from Concord Academy.
Hi, Don.
Hello, welcome. And I think I'm experiencing technical difficulties. So I believe on the call with me, maybe Jim Newton from DSK Architects and Planners. Jim, are you there?
Yep. Hey, Don. How's it going?
Beautiful. Thank you.
Hello,
Jim.
everyone.
So I think what I'll try to do, if you don't mind, Nick, is give a high altitude overview. And then Jim, who's been working with us hand in hand on figuring out parking strategies for this new development that we're working on, can explain some of the techniques. This is our 100th anniversary, and we have always imagined that we would need to upgrade our existing performing arts center. We're proposing that would construct on the west side of campus a new Centennial Arts Center that would have about a 175-seat playhouse, a 125-seat music hall, and associated practice rooms and support spaces within that building. In order to do that, we need to reconfigure some existing parking and move a couple of buildings over to the western edge of our campus. What this will give us is really a more unified and integrated campus. The east side of campus, as we call it, is more or less the quad area. That would be the area closest to the downtown. And the area we're proposing is what used to be, back in the day, 4 tennis courts, which is now additional parking and a couple other parking panels in there. 4 years ago, when we acquired adjacent property, it opened up the possibilities of what we could do. And we have been working with DSK for about the past 4 years on our plans. Couple of goals here. One was to unify our campus. The other one was really to create more green space. Sustainability is part of our mission statement, and we feel very strongly about that. We're going to take an athletic field that we no longer really need. It's about 1.5 acres, and turn it into a pollinator meadow. We want to create a village commons that would go with a campus lawn that would front this building that I just spoke about, and then take the existing academy garden, which is in front of the chapel and the center of our campus, and really take that from about 1/4 acre to almost 1/2 acre of open space. And how does one do that? You need to go in and remove some of the 30 to 40 foot high arborvitae that have been grown up over decades and have encroached, and then to recreate that space with additional plantings of deciduous trees around the periphery to create an additional green space right there in the core part of campus. This will impact parking. We're trying to strike this balance of green space and pavement that we need for parking. Concord Academy has historically used Main Street, as you probably all know, for some additional parking, and we're proposing to try to use that. And we have done a fair amount of research and work on this to figure out what our peaks and valleys are, so to speak, and how this can work both for us and for the town. Jim, did I miss anything there in the high altitude overview?
Your opening remarks were wonderful, Don. I don't know if any of the committee members have any questions on what you've proposed so far.
None for me.
Super. I'm happy to share some exhibits if that would be helpful to flesh out the discussion. I think the host has disabled screen sharing, so I'm not sure if someone could unlock that.
I think maybe the thing to speak specifically to that jumps out in the plan. Well, let me say a couple of things sort of prefatory. The Concord Long Range Plan that we created back in 2017 has significant content related to transportation, which includes parking and other such things. And the town's goals are specifically to, in the long run, to get people out of cars. And so, that's a good thing. If you get them out of cars, you don't need so much parking. That's a good thing too. Parking, however, is a very contentious and emotional issue. People like it, people want it. And when I saw the plans eliminating 57 spaces, I realized, there's good and bad in that, depending on whether you're looking at the short term or the long term. So I think that's what would specifically like you to speak to is, what do you see is the impact on the town when that happens? Because there are clearly going to be groups like the merchants that are going to be very, very concerned about that.
You should be able to share now. Yeah, there you go.
Okay, super. Is that up on the screen for everyone to see?
Yep.
So yeah, Nick, great points all around. I think, Don can help me contextualize some of
I don't think we're seeing what you intend for us to see. We're seeing your whole desktop with your meeting calendar.
It might
that
be-
up?
Yeah, there we go.
That's better.
Yeah, there we go.
Thanks.
Big up,
Yeah,
Jim.
I need help with my meeting calendar. So yeah, any help you guys can provide there would be great as well. So essentially what this exhibit looks at is the current state of parking distributed across campus. A couple things of note here to call out. First off, I think East Campus, which Don spoke of here, really centers around the campus quad, which is the primary open space in front of the main academic facility here. You'll notice in orange here, majority of the parking is on West Campus currently. And I think one spot, Nick, that I wanted to call out specifically to your comment is the 64 spaces here that are shown on what were previously tennis courts. So those tennis courts actually housed temporary classrooms while Concord Academy constructed the new science wing expansion and renovated the main school entrance in about 2015, Don, I want to say. We had 4 temporary trailers that were on that site for about 18 months. Once the town enacted the parking limits along Main Street here, coming out of, I think, the planning effort that you mentioned, Concord Academy essentially brought these 64 spaces online to be able to bring all of their campus parking into campus. So they were able to vacate essentially all the use on Main Street for staff, students, and faculty at that point in time. So the 204 spaces allowed them to accommodate most all of the campus population singularly within the campus confines. There are a significant number of students. Sure. Thanks, Don.
Just a point of clarification. That's when the meters went up along Main Street, to be clear.
Thanks. You may be muted, Nick.
Does anyone recall how far along Main Street the meters go? Do they cover all the parking spaces all the way out to?
At one point, they went all the way, yes.
Okay.
So essentially what was done is these tennis courts were taken over as parking, which got us to the total number you're seeing here in orange of 204. There are about, I don't know, Don, help me with the number of students that live on campus.
155, Jim.
Thanks, Don. So there's 155 students that live on campus in these residences that front along Main Street. None of those students are allowed to have cars. So all of the on-campus residents do not have vehicles. And then faculty also live in those houses. So the number of faculty spaces don't actually need to be double counted with folks that are residing in those halls. Additionally, I don't know, Don, if you have numbers off the top of your head of the number of students that commute via the commuter rail.
We're estimating about 100 students do that reverse commute out of the Boston area and come west, and then they go back usually in the 5-6 o'clock time frame.
And none of them drive?
I can tell you that we're in that range of about 100 kids. Do any of them drive? I can't tell you that. I just don't know that information. But we strongly encourage our kids to take the train, and they're very MBTA savvy, shall we say, commuter rail savvy.
So essentially, I think the school's been really focused through their long-range sustainability planning, like the town, and trying to promote more multimodal transport onto campus and trying to keep a lot of that campus community centralized here. Relative to some of the other schools in town, Concord Academy also benefits from the fact that they're right on Main Street. So a lot of students can actually walk from campus to get to most of the amenities that are needed within the core campus, and that's within that half-mile walking radius from the center of town. Essentially, if you can see the existing plan that's being shown in orange, the proposed plan suggests shifting some of that parking density back onto Main Street into that kind of pre-parking meter condition. And the proposal suggests that we'd be looking to potentially leverage up to about 57 parking spaces to get back to that 204 space total. And really a lot of that density is within the academic day between sort of 8 o'clock and 3 o'clock and doesn't persist into the evenings or on the weekends. So we feel like that's actually fairly complementary to a lot of the demand within the core of the town center here. And similarly, it doesn't extend into the summer peak seasons. It's really only during the academic year that we're going to be looking for some of that overflow parking shown here in orange along Main Street. The plan proposes to reconfigure, as you'll see, parking on West Campus and really unlock a significant amount of green space. So we're actually opening about, I don't know, Don, you'll have to help me with the specific numbers here, but I think it's on the order of 15,000 square feet of new green space in the core campus. So a more permeable area within the core, and taking that parking and shifting it out of that riverfront district where you saw it previously in that tennis court zone. So it allows us to really adjust that density. And similarly, the parking plan that we've created, we've strove to limit the impact on the number of trees that will need to be taken down to accommodate this reconfigured parking layout that you're seeing here. We're approximating about 6 trees potentially being impacted, mostly within this parking panel adjacent to Phelps House, right off of Main Street currently, where the west gate is. So again, the focus here is really trying to limit the amount of impervious area, trying to pull that parking and densify it without it spreading across the entirety of the West Campus zone, and increasing the amount of permeable area. You'll see essentially we've taken the tennis court zone and turned that into the new building footprint, densified the parking over here with more bioswales and additional sustainable planting to manage the runoff and stormwater, and then taken what were formerly athletic fields, which have been relocated to the Moriarty Athletic Campus over towards Route 2, and shifting that over into a pollinator meadow zone, which allows us to again reclaim some of that natural habitat along the riverfront edge and make that more natural plantings, and removing some of the invasive species in that area as well.
Jim, at the start of your comments, you said something about the meters, which I didn't quite follow. Could you explain that?
Sure, yeah. So essentially what we're proposing here, if you'll go back to the previous exhibit, the approximate 67 spaces that were relocated onto the tennis courts once the meters were came into play along Main Street all the way down here, we're suggested taking slightly fewer than that number of 64 spaces and redistributing those along Main Street. So the number that we're proposing is about 57 at peak periods.
But you're not proposing any changes to the metering, that there would be metering or not be metering?
Nope.
Okay. The other question is for Dawn, and that is, who would be using these spaces? Is it staff? Is it, administrative staff and faculty? Who is it?
So I'm going to designate two broad groups. One is adults, whether they be staff or faculty. It's hard for me to discern. And the other group, large group, is students. I'll be honest with you, as one gets through the calendar, due to the RMV driving laws, more and more kids become eligible to drive. And so we see somewhat of an increase in that April, May time. And we've done counts of empty spaces, if you will, along Main Street 3 times a day for over a week, along with on campus, to determine what our needs are. I will add that a lot of our adults are in a part-time status, so a parking spot could flip. We have a number of individual music instruction teachers, as an example. Athletic coaches are another group. They tend to come and go. Athletics is really after the 3 o'clock time frame, and that's when really spaces start to open up around campus and on Main Street.
Let's see. So today you can accommodate everybody on campus, but if you go to this plan, there may be days when you're going to have people who have commitments to be on campus who can't find parking.
Yeah, what we're trying to balance is an environmental part of this. And so this is a great exhibit. We could reduce the amount of green space we have on campus, but we'd have to pay that to accommodate it. And then we've already got a paved Main Street that has parking on both sides. So I would argue that the town has already invested those dollars as resources into the Main Street parking, and we're just trying to capitalize upon that to be as efficient as we can with our space. I think everybody knows that we're landlocked. We've got Main Street on one side and the Sudbury River on the other, neighbors east and west. We're trying to be responsible stewards of where we reside, and keep our business practices in mind, along with sustainability goals.
Yeah, I think rather than seeing some sort of trade-off between the environment and parking, I'd rather see a trade-off between parking and getting people out of cars, and have that discussion. And, if there's some way that the town and those of us who work in transportation as volunteers or staff can work with Concord Academy to reduce the amount of car usage, I think that's something we're very interested in. It's very much aligned with our goals. Laura, did you have a question?
Well, I'll let them respond to that, and then I do have a couple questions.
Okay.
I mean,
that's all.
The train is such an important asset for us. We try to capitalize upon that. We encourage adults that are living in that closer to the core part of Boston to utilize that train. We're talking with carpooling with adults and students. We have bike racks. We have bikes for students to use. We're trying all the tricks we can, but we would love to be able to partner with somebody that can help us take this on. We're a small entity in a bigger universe, if you will.
Right.
And just one more clarification I'll add is, by the town's parking bylaws, we have created a reserve parking plan, Nick, which will basically accommodate that full 204 spaces. And should the town, approve this particular plan, but find that, there's not enough parking on Main Street or there's compression, there's an opportunity for us to build more parking into the plan, to Don's point. So we've got a relief valve. It's not as though we're, limiting ourselves in terms of the development area for parking on this particular proposal.
But I thought you implied, do you have another plan that doesn't require sacrificing a lot of trees and green space?
Oh, no, it has the impact on trees and green space. So you'll see essentially those purple blocks shown on this particular exhibit. And this is a proposal that actually takes us to the full 204 spaces on campus. So the 57 spaces are shown here in reserve. It requires us to remove upward of 40 trees and the core campus along Main Street to accommodate the parking here. And it pushes it a little more further into the community, having to go across of Main Street here to get the parking counts that would be required. And similarly, it increases our impervious area pretty close to our existing conditions in terms of what the implications would be.
Okay. Okay, any members of the committee have any questions or comments? Laura?
Yeah, I do. I would love sort of a little bit more elaboration on, what the goals of Concord Academy are when it comes to, overall transportation. I understand that sustainability is core to your mission, and I'm wondering if, as part of your commitment to sustainability, if you have, written into any of your long-term planning documents, like specific goals when it comes to reducing the number of trips made in single occupancy vehicles by staff, faculty, and students. So that's one of my questions. And then one of my other question is, when you say encourage, could you elaborate on what that is? Are there financial incentives for MBTA? Are you giving out passes? Is there, financial incentives for faculty to use, alternative forms of transit? Are there, what are you doing to encourage that, those behavior changes?
So we give let me frame it this way. There are 43 families that live on campus. There's a number of people that don't live on campus, and we have incentivized by giving those folks that don't live on campus a stipend for commuting, knowing that it does cost money to do that. So we incentivize that. We don't specify that it needs to be done through a rail pass or something else like that, but we do give them dollars for it. So there is financial incentive there. We encourage people to bike. And that's a great thing to say, but the reality is our population that we pull from, both adults and students, isn't in a geographic area that really lends itself to biking. We have there's a handful of people that do bike to campus. We have bike racks for this. Under the new Centennial Arts Center building, we're having additional bike racks there, so trying to encourage that. And as far as CA and specific goals from a sustainability standpoint, we're encouraging people to carpool, but we're not mandating it at this time. We found it a little challenging where we can control where people and who parks on campus, but when you get to a common space like Main Street, other parking areas around town, it's hard for us to enforce that. So we're trying to incentivize it in any way we can, but it's not something that we're mandating.
Okay, yeah, I guess one of the hardest things in the world is to change people's behavior, especially other people. And, encouraging is not a real strong. I mean, I think you need strong incentives, or you need something more than that. I don't know exactly what they are. As I said, I think we're interested in working with you to find ways to make that work. At any rate,
We would welcome that opportunity to have those conversations. We feel very strongly that we're part of the fabric of this community and we have a responsibility here. So we would welcome to have that conversation, to think creatively, collaboratively, how we can make this work for all involved.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, if I might add, Don, I'd be more than happy to speak offline to try to come up with some collaborative solutions to try to make sure that the Concord Academy community is able to find different modes of transit to get to campus and get involved in the community that way.
That would be awesome.
Okay, Laura?
Yeah, I'll just express, Aaron, that I'm happy to work on this. If there's anything that I can do to help. I attended a school very similar to Concord Academy, so I know some of the cultural hurdles you have to overcome. My mom's been a teacher at an independent school very similar to yours for 20 years, so I totally understand. And would love to think creatively about how to get people out of their cars. And the only other thing that I wanted to ask was about bike parking. And I was wondering, if any of the bike parking on campus is covered, and if any of the new bike parking that's planned is going to be covered, and if your new faculty housing is going to include secure indoor bike parking as part of the design, since a lot of those families live right downtown. It's an eminently bikeable community. You could significantly reduce the amount of car travel that they're doing if they have secure indoor parking for their bicycles.
So Laura, there is no dedicated covered space per se for parking. There are a lot of porches and eaves that people put their bikes under. As far as campus residents go, Jim, can you highlight 242 barn?
Yep.
This is the yellow barn that you may see as you go down Main Street. We're just using it for storage, and at lower level, the topography drops off there as you go down that driveway, allows for us to store campus resident bikes. We have a very active community of bikers. There's actually 15 bikes that we have dedicated through a donor just for Borders. That's 155 kids. They get to have bikes to use to transport themselves around. I happen to have a bike. I know there's a number of people that use bikes around campus. I'm also a campus resident, so I'm one of those people. And I would say we have a fairly high percentage of bike users relative to our population.
Okay. Anyone else on the committee before I invite others?
This is Mark.
Mark Galis, go ahead. Mark.
Yes. Hi. Yeah, a few things. I support what Laura was saying about, secure bike parking and covered bike parking. That could make a big difference. In terms of, when I looked at the parking story, it sort of struck me that there was like a big event when the parking meters came in with the restricted spaces, and the academy responded by taking on all that extra parking. And then there's a significant change here with 57 spaces kind of put back on the street. And then, of course, there's the intermediate situation during construction. With the 57 spaces on the street, when I sort of look at the numbers in the that 1 week of observation and things like that, it looks like if it weren't for the Academy Lane being added on, there would be over 100% usage required. So I think it's kind of a big deal. And as someone, as kind of, I think Nick mentioned, et cetera, if there was something intermediate, that might be worth thinking about. Another thing is, I presume there's parking at the Route 2 athletic facilities. I don't know if there's any way to facilitate certain, commuters to use that and then have another way to get to campus with a shuttle or with something else. Just the thought, I don't know how practical it is. Another couple comments while I'm talking. The on-street parking, I think, meters have been removed or not there, but some of the places, like for instance, on the Academy Road, are 3-hour limits during those daytime hours. So it'd be good to kind of figure out all that, your needs for your faculty, whether 3 hours is adequate for them, or they're going to be there all the time. Students are going to be there longer if they're commuting with cars. And I also wonder about the construction timing, because we've got a 250th celebrations in 2025 and 2026 coming up, which might at least temporarily completely change the parking requirements in town, and whether that coincides with construction or, well, I don't imagine construction would be completed by then. So I'm just kind of throwing out those as concerns that need to be put into the whole mix. Thanks.
Mark, let me, you had a loaded comment there, so let me try to unpack that a little. And if I forgot something, please speak up. In regards to timing, we're hoping that we can start this project next May or next spring. Let me reframe it that way. And that would be some of the enabling projects. And then part of that is we need to move 2 existing campus buildings on campus and move them to the western edge. And then we anticipate this is about a 2-year cycle of construction, and therefore it would end somewhere a corresponding time, spring of 25. Construction parking, we've taken that into account. We have had experience with this. We have also allowed the library to use some of our area for parking. Jim, if you could highlight that area between Monroe and, yeah, perfect. And we found that has worked out well. We received approval from historic districts and other boards to make that a temporary gravel lot. And to our word, the minute the library was done, we pulled that material out and it's now back to a lawn area. We do have a reserved parking plan in place. If this doesn't work, And that would be to the left of the existing, yeah, Jim just highlighted it there, to pull that together. We have talked about the idea of utilizing our athletic campus. And it sounds great in theory. Practicality is another challenge, because every car that's down there is a car that we can't accommodate, and therefore infiltrates that neighborhood. So we're trying to balance those two needs there. I feel like I missed something, Mark. Is there something else that you asked that I didn't cover?
I was just saying, so you gave a kind of rough idea about timing, but it seems like, especially if there's, well, it seems like already there's an overlap with the 2025, and I don't know, commemorations. And so I don't know how significant that is, or what entities in town or in the state would be, would want to be kind of engaged on that. So
So
I'm
this-
just, I'm raising, sharing thoughts.
Understand, Mark. So think of the construction schedule as a bell curve. Starts off slowly, gets pretty intense towards the middle, and then drops off at the end. When I say spring of 25, we're dropping off on the tail end. I am not really sure we're going to have that many people that would be on campus to finish up that building, find a punch list, etc., because things deaccelerate by then. That would really impact the 25 committee work. But I also will be honest with you, I don't know what their schedule looks like.
Okay.
Can I
Thank
ask you a question? You may have already answered this, but I may have missed it. The total proposed parking, does that reflect a peak demand, or is that average demand?
So that's based on peak headcount, so full FTEs, all teaching faculty on campus, all students on campus, and that's the baseline that we used to create that peak load calculation.
And how typical or how often is that peak achieved? Is that frequent or is that rare?
I think it's a representation of what we can expect. When Jim and I started talking about this in the spring about needing to do some counts to verify our assumptions, we purposely stayed away from the April vacation and went the next week because we felt that was a more representative sample. Also, I alluded to the fact that as young adolescents get older, they have more driving privileges, so we try to capture that at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah, so the data counts that we did were probably, again, representative of the peak demand from both the student population and also the demand that we would see on campus.
Thank you.
Laura?
Yeah, so just clarifying, the counts that you did were of available spaces along Main Street. Does that assume that every campus parking spot was filled at the time? Or I might have that.
So yeah, we counted both on-campus availability and street availability at the same time, so we could understand how many spaces were available on campus and how many spaces were available on the street at the same time.
So that raises an interesting question.
I see the chart now. Sorry about that.
No problem.
That raises an interesting question. If the faculty and staff know that there are some people are going to have to park on street, and I'm driving towards the campus and I see a space on the street, I'm very likely to grab that space and not bother to find out that there are spaces on the campus that are open. I think that's just human behavior. I think
Nick, I agree with you. It's human behavior. It's parking the closest point to where one is going.
or if you know spaces are sparse, the first place you find a space that isn't too bad a walk. So I'm just saying that I think that there's an implicit assumption built into the modeling you did, which is that all the spaces on campus will fill up first, and then people will park on the street. I don't think that's true at all. I just think people are going to park where they find it convenient to park.
Right, but if you believe in that it's the shortest distance between 2 points, to park all the way down the street towards Nishotic and Thoreau would be a further walk than parking into the West Campus.
Right, but if I saw something near the driveway where I would turn into the campus and there was an empty space, I might grab it. That's all I'm saying.
Understand?
Okay, I just wanted to make that point, that I think there is an assumption that's, I think, unrealistic in the behavior that you're assuming about how people are going to use parking spaces. Deborah, you've been waiting a long time. Thank you. Let me go to you.
Yeah, thank you guys. I really appreciate this. This may be a
Could you
little bit
identify yourself?
outside.
Identify yourself, everyone. Thanks.
Deborah Adelman, resident at 1 Abbott Lane, also member of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Advisory Committee. I know that there are many conversations ongoing about the Crosbys and how there are many parking spaces that go unutilized. My question is, given that it is under 0.6 of a mile from the academy, is there any value of exploring the opportunity to use those currently unused parking spaces for this effort, even if it possibly meant some sort of a shuttle? That's my question.
I would definitely be interested in that conversation. So I've been at CA for almost 30 years. And I can't tell you how many parcels of land I've looked at to help try to solve the parking conundrum that we have. Crosby's would be an attractive alternative. The hard part is, how do we incentivize people to do that, to move away from the core part of where they are? That's the human behavior, the EQ part that we struggle with.
Right, and I think that's a problem that the town has in incentivizing behavior. So I think that's a problem we share, and if we work on it together, I think we're more likely to get someplace that would be mutually a good thing.
And I would welcome that conversation.
Okay, so let's see, Aaron Stevens will be having that with you, and I see another hand up, Jennifer Schuneman.
Hi, Jennifer Schuneman, 712 Monument. I'm also on the Economic Vitality Committee, and I'm on the communications team for the Rev 250 Planning Committee. So I like the direction you're headed in trying to prioritize more green space. I'm not as worried about the impact of these spaces on the Concord Center merchants, because we have a hard enough time getting people to park just a few feet away from the public lots. But there could be some real interest in seeing how things go with the Concord trolley that's in a pilot phase right now. Part of what they're doing is collecting usage data. Beth Williams from the Tourism and Economic Vitality Division is doing a great job of partnering with some other groups to go after a grant, which is, if it comes through, would provide 3 full years of an expanded trolley service. The goal of it, really is more about moving visitors around, and it's really with an eye to that Rev 250 surge that we're expecting. But I wonder, Don, if there's a chance to tag on to that and maybe partner in a way that could, for example, develop a stop on campus for the trolley, perhaps, for a minimal investment, we could enhance that service, take some pressure off, particularly folks that might be coming in on public transportation. My other thought was, Nick, you had a great point. Human behavior is a little tough to anticipate. I am aware, though, of some relatively new technology that allows people on an app, and the audience of the campus is pretty technology friendly, to know exactly how many parking spaces are available at a given time. And if there's interest there, I can connect you with some of those technology services that are maybe not so expensive. And it might be a way to encourage people to take a look first before they park on the street. So those were my thoughts. Thank you.
Jennifer, great comment relative to the trolley. We've been having an ongoing conversation with Elizabeth Hughes in the planning department about this, and we would love to have a side conversation. Again, I have 155 young adolescents that are living on campus, and for that, allow them to get outside of Concord and see something else. That's why our proximity to the train is so important to us from a cultural and a business standpoint. The technology part about open spaces on Main Street, I'm just kind of intrigued by that in general. And I know Jim is a self-professed geek, and he would be excited about that too. So let us have a side conversation about that.
Yeah, that'd
Sure.
be great.
And just a quick note, for your students, even right now, the trolley is completely free. So they can hop on, at the train station or at the visitor center, and it takes them to all the main historic sites like the museum, the Orchard House, the North Bridge, even over to West Concord. So that service is available to them right now at no cost.
Awesome.
Just through November, though.
Okay. Okay.
I
let's
have
see.
one last comment or one last question and a
Sure,
suggestion.
Laura? Yeah.
So my last question is, we've talked a lot on this committee about the need for better data, and I'm, faculty, staff, and students are a pretty captive audience when it comes to collecting data. So I wonder if you have any plans, or might make some plans to collect data from faculty, students, and staff about, what transportation options they're using currently, which ones they would be willing to use, and what their barriers to using those preferred alternatives to cars would be. I think that data could be really helpful in understanding, how mode shifting might happen. So that was my sort of question/suggestion. And my other suggestion is, before the pilot ends, I mean, we talk about incentivizing behavior change. Before the pilot ends, if Concord Academy wanted to incentivize students to ride the trolley to West Concord to get an ice cream at Reasons to Be Cheerful or something like that, and actually like make it an incentive for them, I think that a huge part of it is just the hurdle of like, I don't know where the trolley stops. I don't know how to get on it. I don't know, like I had to go do a test ride of it just to understand how the service worked. So I think that maybe helping the students get over the hurdle by either organizing something this fall or at least just providing a voucher for ice cream in West Concord could help people understand how to use the trolley service.
I think there are many of us that have lived in Concord for a long period of time, and we get addicted to this core group of businesses in the downtown area and forget about what a sweet spot West Concord is. So we can do a better job there, and we can work on that. Relative to data, unfortunately, we're a little bit of a data geek school, and so we do surveys all the time. And as you continue to do surveys, you start to see a declining return in those that enter it. So let us put that into the hopper to think about, but we would like to partner with you. We also have, and I'll just throw this out, a student club called the Big Data Club. They love getting into yeah, you love that, huh? They love getting into complex issues and figuring out all the permeables that go into that. So that would be something I would feel free in talking with them about to get them engaged with you. Could be a real resource for the town.
I just want to mention that with regard to the trolley, which is, I think, a fantastic pilot program, may lead to other things. I mean, going forward after the free period, perhaps the Academy could work out some arrangement for students to have either reduced fares or some underwriting and free fare or whatever. If you're a student, I don't know, be something to think about.
Absolutely.
That'll be part of our discussion with Erin in the Academy.
I
Okay.
also just want to really second and thank you for highlighting West Concord. They've had a couple of big hurdles thrown at them recently with needed construction, but at a difficult time. And having the trolley go there is really helpful. And I'm sure that Adam at Deborah's Natural Gourmet would also be really interested in providing some kind of incentive to the students. As you know, they've just opened the refillery there, and with the construction and everything, they're just trying to raise awareness. So you've got a lot of great opportunities to get some help to give those carrots. And even in terms right now of capturing that data, it's already built into Beth's program to be capturing usage and demographics. So at least some of that data could get captured until November.
So we have somebody internally dedicated to student activities. That's their job. And so I'm going to pass this information along to them.
Okay, thank you. And who would their contact be? Erin, would that be you or someone when you're away for a couple of weeks or?
Yeah, you can contact me. I'm more than happy to work with anybody, and we can make sure that we're bringing our communities together, and we're finding some transportation and hopefully incentivizing students and faculty to find alternate methods to get to and around school.
So
Okay.
for the time being, let me be that conduit, that contact, that main point to talk to from a town-gown relationship, and I can find the right person internally to turn that over to.
That sounds great. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Okay, I think that's it. I don't see any other hands up. It's been a very good discussion from my point of view. I think we got the issues on the table that, you know, are of concern to people in the town in terms of our plans and where we want to go. And my bottom line is, it sounds like Concord Academy is serious about working with us so that we can, you know, achieve both our sets of goals around transportation and accessibility for people. So that's a good thing. Thank you.
I can't emphasize enough our connection with the town of Concord, where we are, the historical nature, and being stewards of where we reside. So we want to be good partners with you. Please reach out to us or others.
Okay, thank you, Don. Okay, is that it? Okay, you guys free to leave. If you want to stay and hear our conversations, it's all good.
Well, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. We'll be in touch.
Okay. Good night.
Let's see. Yeah, if you could, Erin, make sure they have a contact while you're gone, whoever, just so we don't lose each other.
Absolutely. I know that they've been in touch with Elizabeth Hughes, so we can all work together to figure something out.
Yeah, well, the busiest person in the world after you. Okay. So that was that topic. Trolley update, Erin's turn.
Great. So things are still going. We have another, oh geez, was it September? So another month and a half-ish. We end November 13th, right after Veterans Day. We've been having pretty steady numbers, which is nice. During the week in the teens to 20s, and on the weekends going up to about the 30s. So while we are, it's not quite as high ridership as we'd like, we're expecting a little bit of a bump when the peak leaves come. Hopefully they will be good this year and we'll get lots of people coming to go leaf peeping. And we are encouraging more people to take the public transit to get to Concord, so that we've been seeing a lot of people using the train to get to Concord and then hopping on the trolley, which is great. And while we don't have a trolley tracker yet, we are very hopeful that it will be starting in the next week or two. We're waiting on some technology. I'm very excited to see that, because that will not only track who or where people are getting on and off the trolley, but it'll also provide a way for people to see where the trolley is. So that will be huge. We've been waiting on that technology. It has unfortunately been sort of held up, just like everything else, with supply chain issues. So we are very hopeful that it'll be starting soon. I'm working with the company now. Those are sort of the big trolley updates. I don't know if anybody has any questions. I know that Laura also rode the trolley and might have some other things to pitch in, but I see that Jennifer's raising her hand.
I just wanted to let you know too that the fall issue of Discover Concord magazine just dropped this past weekend, and there's a whole article about the trolley and how to ride it. So we're hoping that it's very popular with visitors, but also with locals. So we hope that'll help too.
Perfect.
Okay, yeah. Let's see. Anything else? Anyone else on the trolley? You? Okay. New law policy on electric bikes. Who's leading that one? Is it Erin or Phil or whom?
That's me. I'll just keep talking. So part of the legislation the legislative session that just ended in July included legislation on electric bikes, e-bikes. So while I'm not completely up up to standards on electric bike legislation. The basics are that they passed legislation that has categories 1 and 2, which is up to 20 miles per hour, but did not vote, I believe, on category 3, which is up to 28 miles per hour. The thing that I think is most important, because while this is a statewide legislative piece of legislation, they did allow for sort of home rule. So we can set things such as places where e-bikes can and cannot be used. We could set things such as speed limits on, in school zones, or, things like that, to try to make sure that we're keeping people safe if there are certain areas that are areas of concern, or we just want to make sure that was my biggest concern, was that there was going to be legislation that allowed for sort of free use of e-bikes without any sort of thought to what different communities would need. But they did a good job of making sure that there was that ability to tailor it to the community. I don't know if Phil has anything else to add, or Laura, who I know also has an e-bike, so.
Either person have anything? Laura or Phil?
Aaron, do you happen to have a copy of the legislation that you can shoot around?
Yep, I can share. I have the, what is this? I have the bill text.
Okay. Yeah,
So I
think
can
that would be
share that.
I think that would be great for everybody to at least have it.
If the town wants to do anything in terms of home rule, there would have to be somebody working on that. And I'm wondering if that's going to wind up in our lap or where that would be, or the traffic management committee, or whatever it's called, which is the police and public works.
So nothing has to be done right away. It might be something that is enacted later or decided later. As of right now, we don't have anything on the books, but we will see how it goes and play it by ear, I think.
I think it would be good if there was some clear responsibility delineated. I'm not sticking our hand up collectively to do it. I think maybe the traffic management group might be the place to start, because it's primarily a safety issue, I think, for any possible home rule. But if we don't set up a place, then someone will come up with a warrant article and then we'll be reacting to it. And, that isn't the best way to do things. So that's my suggestion, is that someone look into that and getting that committee to, my suggestion, that committee to look into it. Did you hear that, Terry?
Don't worry, I sit on it, Nick.
Okay. Oh, you are. Oh, good. You there. Okay.
I heard you.
So, okay. Let's see.
I do have one. So just two things. First of all, there's another piece of e-bike legislation that's worth noting, which is that there's now incentives for e-bikes to bring down the cost of e-bikes somewhat. And just to clarify, class 1 and class 2 e-bikes that were defined, like the point of these definitions was to give some legal clarity that these are not mopeds. These are not motorized vehicles that can travel as fast as a motorcycle. They are bicycles. And 20 miles per hour, I have 2 e-bikes. And 20 miles per hour, I cannot ride as fast as most spandex clad men, even with my electric assistance. I'm getting passed constantly by spandex clad riders, actually women too. I should not be gendered about that. Excuse me. But my point is that, I will just express, as an e-bike rider, I am so relieved that we now have some clarity about these are bicycles, and e-bikes provide non-athletic riders and folks with disabilities and all sorts of other people who can't ride bicycles easily the ability to ride at a normal pace, like anybody on a bicycle. So I'm overjoyed that we are no longer in a legal gray zone, and I'm also really excited to see these incentives because they are very expensive, and e-bikes can provide, a really great transportation option, especially for a lot of low income people. So I'll just add that with my e-biker hat on.
Thank you. Okay. let's see, I guess moving on, if there's nothing else on e-bikes.
I have some comments on e-bikes.
Oh, you do?
Sorry,
Go ahead.
I raised my hand. For some reason, it
I didn't
didn't.
see it. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's okay. So again, Deborah Adelman, 1 Abbott Lane, Concord, Massachusetts, member of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Advisory Committee and chairperson of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Advisory Committee Subcommittee on Safety. We are taking up the discussion about e-bikes under the larger conversation about safety. Let me be clear, from a personal perspective, again, not in my official capacity, I'm a huge fan of e-bikes. I have multiple family members that are using e-bikes. I just rode 96 miles on rail trails over the last 10 days and was delighted to see so many people in various stages of life able to ride the rail trail because they had the ability to ride an e-bike. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. But it's raising the question now that we have legislation that has, I like your expression, taken us out of the gray zone. How do we communicate our safety principles in the context of a larger community? And again, in our world, that community is rail trail specific, but in your community, it's all transportation. How can we work together, the transportation committee and the other communities in Concord, for example, the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Committee? Should we work together so that at the end of the day, the community knows what we expect from them as good stewards when they're riding an e-bike? And that's the question I think I wanted to ask of this community this evening is, what do you think when you think about ways to interact between the different communities in Concord government, in this case, the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Advisory Committee, Subcommittee on Safety, and the Transportation Committee, specifically about e-bike?
Silence. That's a good question. My quick reaction is, I think the biggest issue is the same issue we have with bicycles and automobiles, which is education. And it's a huge topic, and it's a very difficult one that people have been struggling with for quite a while. So but that doesn't mean it's impossible. It just means that it takes serious effort to deal with it. So, my comment on it is, gee, it sounds like we've got a huge educational challenge, and the existence of e-bikes just added another dimension to it, or changed the urgency, or has a different kind of urgency. Because, an implication of what you and Laura have said is that some of the people riding e-bikes may not be that physically adept, and, a little more care, a little more room may have to be given to people. And it's all the more urgent to deal with this issue of education. Laura?
Yeah, just in response, Deborah, I think that it's really important for our committees to work together on this, because I think that one of the challenges of rail trails is that people think about them for recreational use and they don't think about them for transit. And I will say that I ride the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail every day to get my son to preschool in our e-bike. And I would not be able to do that commute without an e-bike. And if I don't ride on the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, I ride on Old Marlborough Road, which is a much less safe route for us. And I have a 4-year-old. So this is a huge part of safety for me and our family, and it's transportation and safety right there. Yeah. So I would love to work together to tackle this. I'll also say anecdotally, I still can't believe that this happened, but my son, who is 4, rode 15 miles on protected rail trails last weekend. And so the safety aspect of a bike trail is very present in my mind right now, because I can't tell you how many times I screamed, "Emery, you have to stay right," when there was a high-speed cyclist coming at him. And I will say that I think that when we talk about safety and bicycle speeds, I think we need to be much more inclusive in our language, because actually the most dangerous cyclist that we encountered was a man on drop bars on the, so he had his hands on drop bars that don't have brakes on them. He's got his hands down in his arrow position. And my husband, who is a road cyclist, was like, that's insane. Nobody should have drop bars on a rail trail with children on it. And so I think we need to have a much more comprehensive conversation about what is the inclusive cycling culture that we want to build on our rail trails, that it facilitates children riding to schools, moms taking their kids to preschool, elders going grocery shopping. Many of those things do need an electric assistance, but I actually would counter what Nick said and say most of the e-bikers that I know are not like, it's not like they're unsafe on their bicycles. An electric assistance, you still have to pedal. It's just a matter of being able to go further and go uphill. That's really what it enables for most people. So I wouldn't actually say that it's people who are on e-bikes are inherently less stable than people who ride normal bikes.
I didn't say anything like that.
Well, just in case somebody interpreted it that way.
Well, thank you. Okay.
Mark has a comment.
Mark?
Hi. Yes. Yeah. Thanks, Deborah. Thanks, Laura and Nick. I think it's very, very important to have the maximum communication, get the maximum facts out there about all the diverse users and benefits and challenges and all that, so that we have a kind of common knowledge of what's going on. Not everybody sees every challenge or every opportunity. And between the different committees and things, because of open meeting law concerns and things like that, it can be a little challenging to do certain things officially, but there's no limit on public information being passed on to as many people as possible, so that, we can all kind of bridge these gaps that I think Deborah's mentioning. So I think, we should all try to, well, first of all, it's important to be aware of in the town or in the region what entities are discussing these things and when they're discussing them, and anybody who can view and participate and get information. And then if there are factual things like, as Phil was requesting the text of the new law, then as Laura mentioned, there's a proposed further law, and then there's kind of, higher speed capabilities and stuff that may be more road, automobile alongside type of things. But anyway, it's complicated and there's so many uses. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of lack of information, and that feeds into what Nick said about education, right? Get all these facts available.
Deborah, I have a question for you about rail trails.
Yep.
The state funds them, and are there restrictions? What are the restrictions on use, and what sort of vehicles or what sort of conveyances can be used on the rail trails?
What I can tell you is consistent with what Laura said, that the legislation said that local rail trails can go beyond what the limitations of the law are. So for example, the legislation.
I don't mean with respect to e-bikes. I mean, what sort of conveyances? E-bikes, people on skateboards, other types of things, scooters. Are there any things that aren't allowed? Obviously, cars aren't allowed, but what are the boundaries?
I can get back to you and send to whoever you tell me to the actual guidelines for the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Advisory Committee, for the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. Right now, the way it is written, I believe, is that any vehicle that is not motorized, now that brings up the new amendments based on the legislation. In short, what it says right now is you're limited by miles per hour. You're limited by where you traverse, meaning keep to the right and things like that. It doesn't talk, for example, about the the larger community, that we are working with communities of whether they're e-bikes or e-scooters, for example. We haven't really talked about that. So the rail trail right now, the principles are being discussed at a multi-town meeting. I believe Terry mentioned that right before this, the recording started, which is, I believe, September 15th at 7 p.m. in the Concord Library Fowler, I believe. And I encourage anybody who is able to attend, because your question, Nick, will be specifically addressed at that time. What are the safety principles that the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail wants to adopt? We already have them in place. There's signage, you all can look at that. What changes do we need to make? And then how can we make those consistent across towns? Does that answer your question?
When did you say the meeting is again? Just one more time. And is it a Zoom meeting?
Currently, it's interesting that you mentioned it. Currently, it's a live meeting. I think Terry has her hand up. She can supplement any information. I believe it is the 15th at 7 o'clock in the Fowler Library. It is not planned to be Zoom. I hope they figure something out so that it can be more accessible, but right now it's not.
Okay, Terry?
It's at 2:15 p.m. at the Fowler Library. I got the email back from Nat Welch. And this is the meeting of all the different towns that are on the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail to come up, like I said, with uniform rules for e-bikes and speed limits and right of way and signage. And they are struggling with the Zoom. And I'm wondering, Erin, if you can talk to Chris Carmody and they can try to figure out something about the Zoom.
I don't know why they're struggling. Maybe they're afraid they'll get too many people.
No, it's just a technical thing. They have to, some like staff people have to get together and get it to work.
I mean, I'm going to be traveling in DC and I would like to attend. I know we'll have multiple people, but I could attend, remotely. So hopefully they figure something out. But so I think, Nick, that meeting will cover exactly what your question is. What are the rules today that this particular rail trail is looking to focus on? And then secondarily, we've asked this meeting to also answer another question, which is, how can we learn from other rail trails? We're not the first people to think about these issues. How can we adopt what's worked and avoid what hasn't?
Right. Yep. Okay.
I think we've got
Nick?
Dan.
Yeah, Deborah, I just wanted to say that it's great that you guys are working together as a group along the trail. But I guess the question that arises with me in terms of all of this confusion in terms of the regulations and the rules, why isn't it dealt with on a statewide basis? With, I mean, there's certain basic tenets of safe bike riding. And, in terms of local, variability, any town can put speed limits based on special conditions so that, the Ashawiltica Trail could have a higher speed limit than, say, the Minuteman Trail, if that were appropriate. But it seems to me that if we're so concerned about the messaging and the signage being consistent along one trail, how confusing is that for people that are riding on a variety of different rail trails throughout the state? And is there any effort being made to kind of come up with the rules of the road like you encounter with driving a car? There's certain basic rules that you adhere to. And that the problem that I encounter as a multi-use user of a bike path or of a multi-use trail is that there's just certain non-adherence to basic safety issues. E-bikes that can go 20 miles an hour don't belong on unpaved trails, for example. It's dangerous for other users. But there's nothing that regulates that. And that would be consistent throughout the state.
Yeah.
So, I mean, could there possibly be a statewide effort being made with all of this emphasis we're doing on getting people to ride bikes, paving rail trails, using multi-use trails, just getting some consistency so we don't worry about having to read a handbook every time we cross the town line?
Yeah, it's interesting. Nat Welch is one of our 2 co-chairs for the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Advisory Committee, and he's pretty well connected to people at the state. And he's right now trying to get a meeting later this week with the Massachusetts person who is exactly interested in what you are. I don't know what the answer will be, but he has the exact same perspective that you do, which is, why are we doing this locally? Can't we, in some way, shape, or form, have consistent principles? I think the answers will get there. This is the classic example where technology is moving faster than regulation. My work in my day job is cybersecurity. And when you think about the vast changes in cybersecurity and how fast they move, laws are way, way slower. So we'll get there. But that's why the communities, as in Concord, have really stepped up. And I'm just so proud to be a member of this community, because we have a wonderful asset and we just want to make sure that we continue to make it safe for our community. And I encourage everybody to participate in the multi-state meeting, but also we'll publicize the agenda and meeting of our subcommittee on safety. You know, please encourage your neighbors to attend that as well. And all of these issues will be discussed.
So that'll be a town-wide meeting, a posted town Concord meeting of the safety subcommittee.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, you know, something else that struck me as I was riding these various paths is most of the signage referring to what can't use them refers to motorized vehicles. And if you look at the state definition, these are motorized vehicles, the e-bikes. And so are they not allowed on the bike trails?
Yeah, now they're allowed, but yeah, it's a good point. It's something that
Signage has to be changed. Yeah.
Absolutely, without question.
Just in passing, I wonder how this is handled in other countries that are far more advanced than we are in terms of non-automotive use of roads and trails.
Yeah. I'm just hoping to find out from other states. I didn't even go international yet. So Minnesota is so far beyond us. They have just a wonderful, extensive trail system. So we're getting there. But data, somebody mentioned data. I'm just a huge data fan. So I encourage everybody to participate. And let's just be clear, this Massachusetts law took way too long, but it's a small step in the right direction. Rail trails are just essential multi-use opportunities for all of us, and we just want to make them safe.
Thank you, Deborah.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And just to confirm, it's 2:15 on the 15th. I just
That's-
want to confirm because
That's what
2:15.
Terry said, yes.
Yes, and I forwarded it to Aaron and Nick, and they can send it to everyone on the committee.
Yeah, I'll send it around.
Okay, moving on, sidewalk sale. Well, Erin was ill and couldn't be with us that day, and Laura, I want to acknowledge Laura, who was there for the entire thing, organized it, brought materials. She brought a 10 by 10 canopy on her e-bike, along with lots of other materials. It was amazing to see her pack it up and drive off. Anyway, Laura did a great job. I was there for an hour or two in the morning and then again in the afternoon. So I'll just start off by making a couple of comments on it. It was a Saturday from about 10 to 2, I think, roughly. And I was impressed. Most of the people, you know, we grabbed people who were walking by. It wasn't hugely attended, the whole thing. It was sort of sparse. But most of the people we talked to,
Nick, I sorry to interrupt you, but I do want to let you know that I made a slide presentation with the
Oh, you
notes
did? Okay.
we took. So just
You read
in
and
case you want to.
I'll cover whatever you didn't
Yeah.
cover. That's great. Go ahead. Do it.
Okay, so but thank you for the introduction, and I also want to acknowledge that you were there for almost the entire time, as was Josh, who was our UNH sustainability fellow, and it was like the hottest day of the summer, and so it was brutal, but it was great to talk to people. I pulled out a couple of, we took extensive notes during the event, so I pulled out some highlights from the notes. But Nick, you're going to have to fill in because I think that not everything that we talked about with people got captured in the notes. So, so please help me fill in. One of the activities that we did, and I credit Erin to this, she had created this fantastic sign for us that we put up on an easel right at the front of our booth. And as people were walking by, we were asking them if they were Concord residents. And then if they said that they were Concord residents, we were engaging them in conversation around this tools. We were asking them, how do you wish you were getting around Concord? And what is stopping you from using that public transportation? Similar to what I was just posing to the Concord Academy folks. A lot of people were excited about biking. Just to give a little context to this, I would say maybe 60% of the people who said biking said that they wish that they were using biking and they don't feel safe now. And then, 40%-ish said that they were biking and they were really, they wish that things were safer, but, they were able to get around with their bikes. So much excitement and enthusiasm about the trolley. Every single person who checked the trolley had not ridden the trolley. So this is a theoretical would love to use the trolley, not a lot of people who are currently using the trolley. Bus, we were talking about the Yankee Line bus. Some people were using it or wish that they could use it. Some people are using the train. We talked to a lot of happy walkers, people who live near Concord Center and who walk to town frequently. A few people were excited about rideshare. One person was excited about scooters. And one person said that they wanted to get around Concord by boat. I don't think that was necessarily a serious person, but they were all wonderful conversations. I feel like we got a lot of context for these things. Some of the things that came up in a lot of conversations were concerns about crossing Route 2. A lot of the people who said that they wish that they could get around by bike, this was the big hurdle for them. Oh, well, I live in West Concord and I wish I could get to things in Concord Center, but I don't feel safe crossing Route 2. I feel like I heard that over and over again. Definitely interest in safe cycling routes, not enough public transportation options, enthusiasm for public transportation, but saying that either the limited routes or limited schedules were a problem, or some people were citing the MBTA as not being a particularly reliable source of transportation because of delays and things like that. So those were some things. Nick, do you have anything to add to this? Because I feel like there was a lot that was not captured in our notes here.
I'll amplify a little bit. I was actually a little bit surprised how much the crossing Route 2 came up. And it reminded me that when we were collecting data for the long range plan back about 6 years ago, that was one of the most common complaints of residents, is the perceived danger of crossing Route 2. So I think maybe we've been avoiding it, but we've got to make sure that is really part of our plan. Now, something like the trolley deals with it fairly directly without building an overpass, which is probably impractical and extraordinarily expensive. So I just think we've got to keep that on our list as one of the most important issues for residents. The other thing was, most of the people I talked to, which there were a lot of them, and I was impressed how many of them were actually from other towns nearby. There weren't a lot of tourists that day that talked to us, but there were a lot of people from Acton and Lexington, and it was interesting. So, I've got a snapshot in my mind that says, more people than we may expect just drive into Concord to hang around or shop or something on the weekends. And that's something we should be thinking about. I did a lot of peddling the trolley, just telling people how they could use it. If you've got guests coming to town, why not take the trolley around to see the sights? The schedule is set up perfectly for that. Stop off at Orchard House, an hour later, there'll be another trolley. So I think there are ways like that we can promote the trolley. That was for that day. That was it. I guess one other thing that actually came up in our discussion with Concord Academy, whoever brought it up about coupons, I think that's a good way of promoting the trolley. Maybe that idea of a coupon for an ice cream cone, but have it be tied to the schedule of the trolley, like the coupon's good for an hour. Something like that, so that so that the merchant doesn't get abused by someone grabbing a coupon and using it 3 days later, or driving over to West Concord. That's not what we're trying to promote. Okay, yeah. So that was it, mostly me. Route 2.
Yeah, Mark, do you want to add something? I do have a couple more slides, but please jump in.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, no, I just wanted to completely agree that the Route 2 safe crossing for pedestrians and cyclists is super important. And there are a lot of things can be done, I would think, by expert study without an overpass or an underpass short of that. I feel like it's some of those cross Route 2 on grade crossings are challenging even for motorists, and there have been fatal accidents, I believe. So those intersections are not really, I mean, you've got something amounting to a super highway with a country road crossing. that's, I don't know. I think that's a really high priority. The other thing that Laura just mentioned in passing is again that private bus line into Copley Square from Crosby's. When it comes to the 250th celebration and things like that, they could run a lot of those. That in combination with the trolley would be a hell of a thing for the hotels in Boston to advertise. So I also think that's important. Okay, sorry to interrupt.
No, I think you brought up really excellent points. And I will say anecdotally, I have crossed Route 2 at every crossing on my bicycle with and without my son, including getting from West Concord to Barrett's Mill Farm via the Baker Avenue crossing and tiny sidewalk on my cargo bike. It was the most terrifying day of my life. So like the Route 2 crossings, like from my lived experience, I can say that this is so true. And when and talking to people in Concord, this is clearly a huge barrier for people when it comes to getting around Concord. I think there's a lot of hunger for the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail crossing over Route 2, so folks could get over at least in one space without that at-grade crossing. Yeah. And I think if maybe I can just flag it for a future agenda, can we put it in the bike rack for later? We could talk about the Yankee Line bus a little bit more. Because I, for one, would love to know if passengers can ride when it comes back from Boston in the morning, or if they can ride into Boston. Because at the moment, it's only posted that it goes into Boston twice and out of Boston twice in the afternoon. And so, for instance, if we were going to be talking about it for tourists, I'd be interested to know if like between that 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. bus, if there could be one coming out to Concord, since it's going to be traveling that way anyway. So maybe a future agenda item.
Just another data point on crossing Route 2. Last week I came down with COVID, and because there are 5 of us living in this home together, I decided the best thing to do was to check into a hotel. My first thought was someplace in Concord. So I, thought about the Best Western over by Paparazzi. And then I thought about, okay, so you're at the Best Western. What are you going to do for eating? And it was what you said, Laura. I mean, there are no sidewalks. There's no way to get across Route 2 safely. You have to be insane to cross there. So I just would think not just the residents, but the businesses like the hotels. I mean, there's a possibility of some alliance with these businesses and others who would be just really well served by safer crossing of Route 2.
It's so true, especially because the Marriott is, most people, many people stay at those 2 hotels. And at the moment, the trolley doesn't serve either of those hotels. So if you stay across in West Concord, at the moment, you must have a car. There's no way for you to get from the south side of Route 2 hotel to any of the historic sites without a car, unless you're me and you're like, I'm just going to ride my bicycle across at Baker Avenue Extension. And, I did not have my son with me when I did that crossing, because that crossing terrifies me. Okay, but back to my little slideshow here. Just a few more points to highlight. Some key learnings for me is that we encountered a lot more residents that don't have cars than I expected. We spoke to several elders who have given up their cars. I spoke to one worker who lives in Concord Center and works in West Concord. I talked to several people who have family members who live locally that have disabilities that prevent them from driving. And I did talk to a group of teenagers as well who were not driving yet. So I think that for me, it really reaffirmed this idea that like we have a lot of people who don't have cars here in Concord, and they're being and they are not well served by what is currently there. And I think that's one of the reasons why we saw so much enthusiasm for the trolley, because folks who have been struggling to get around are seeing this as a potential, you know, huge boost in their ability to get around town. Top topics were definitely enthusiasm for the trolley. A few people had ridden it, but most people were learning about it for the first time. Definitely interested in safer cycling. And as Nick said, we met a lot of people from Acton and Lexington who, when they heard about the trolley, said, oh, it would be amazing for there to be interconnection between Acton and Concord, Lexington and Concord. I would ride a public transit option if there was one available. So that was really great. Some trolley suggestions that came up during our conversations. A lot of people were excited about the trolley, but wished that they could flag it down instead of having to walk to designated sites. This was especially true to several people who I talked to who have limited mobility and live along the trolley route, and said, hey, if my wife could walk down to the end of her block and flag the trolley and get to Concord Center, that would be amazing service for her. Definitely more interest in more stops in West Concord. There was a suggestion to add a stop at Walden Pond, some suggestions for how we could improve promotion around town. The worker that I spoke to who lives in Concord Center in West Concord said he would love to be able to ride it, but it didn't align with his work schedule. Interest in allowing dogs on the trolley so dog owners could get to favorite walk sites without their cars, which was an interesting one. And some interest in the trolley being electric. So those were some other things. And that is the end of my little presentation.
Thank you.
Can I comment on a few things?
Sure.
Yeah.
Laura, could you bring that last slide back up, please? Just so I can, perfect. Well, first of all, I just want to mention that the crossing of Route 2 is definitely top of mind and comes up frequently in conversations, especially when we see that there are grant opportunities. We're trying to figure out how we might be able to apply for grants, or what things might fall under certain categories, how to cross Route 2, or finding some sort of funding a study or something like that comes up very frequently. So we can try to figure that out. We've applied for a couple that we haven't received yet, but it's definitely top of mind. So don't you worry, we're not forgetting about it. So a couple of things. Flag stops is definitely something that I am interested in, and something that we might be able to explore in the future. It wasn't really possible for the pilot. Same thing with more stops in West Concord. We'd also love to have more stops around just Concord in general, and that might be different type of trolley, that might be a different type of service, but it's something that we're definitely interested in doing. Walden Pond is very tricky.
Yes.
As you probably, if you've ever looked at their Twitter during the summer, they have to shut down at least once a day and stop letting people in because they're at capacity. So there's the concern that people could sort of cheat the system and jump on the trolley, be able to get to Walden Pond, even though it's closed. So there's that concern. We talked to Walden Pond about it, and they basically said it's a no-go at this point, but it would be something to explore in the future. We'd love to expand the hours to accommodate workers, as well as go to different places so that we can better accommodate workers. Dogs, unfortunately, some people think that their dogs are better trained than they are, so it's difficult to allow dogs onto the trolley or onto transit services. It might be something to explore in the future. I know that our current provider does not allow dogs other than service dogs.
And, on Walden Pond, maybe one way you could sell it to Walden Pond is the fact that we would bring people who didn't have cars. But there is the issue of how you let them in if the pond is closed. But anyway, I just think there's a possibility there, because they probably have similar incentives to not have so many people driving there.
I know that there's a real issue of people parking at the high school.
Oh, yeah.
Or,
Walking.
you know, in the general area and walking over. So it's definitely something to look at.
Right, and they walk through the woods sometimes instead of entering through the entrance, so it's an issue.
With respect to Walden, it may be something that certain seasons, it might be something that the state would consider, TCR would consider more, but not peak summer season with the swimming, closures and things. Because I'm not sure if it's just the park, it's not just the parking lot, it's the capacity at the pond, I think, and the
Yes, that's what I.
contamination. Yeah. So that, maybe sometime in the fall or sometime early spring, they might want more people to go.
Yeah, I know that they use the parking lot as sort of their way to tell how many people are there, because it is difficult to get there unless you drive. So that is how they sort of count people. So that's their metric that they use, to my understanding. But it's definitely something to explore in the future, especially if we continue this trolley program, which we'd love to do. And I'm definitely very interested in the trolley being electric, or even hybrid would be great. We're definitely exploring it and very hopeful for the future. But I just wanted to flag those different trolley things, or things that are on my mind, and definitely a part of the program going forward if we can continue it.
Hey, Aaron, maybe a little simplistically, but as far as the Walden and trolley connection there, is there any chance that there could be a two-way communication between the parking lot people and the trolley? Because as as pointed out, it's to their benefit not to have so many cars coming there too, and it's along our mission. But I also had a question, Laura. As far as I'm obtuse, but I'm not a very bold bicyclist, and yet I find that crossing, at the Emerson Hospital crossing, or going into West Concord, just adhering to the lights, it doesn't seem that frightening to me. I mean, you have to stop, you have to wait, and all that. But
There have been people killed at those crossings, but by cars that don't stop, that are on Route 2.
what about
To your point, just to respond to your point, as I said, I cross at those two that you cited, Sudbury Road and 62. I cross those every day. I cross them with my son. I also feel quite safe there. I will say that when I am cycling with my 4-year-old on his own bicycle, where he's not as reliably straight. Like, I think about it for, the Willard School District is split by Route 2. Children who live north of Route 2 are not cycling to school at Willard, because crossing Route 2 as a 7-year-old is a scary thing. As a parent, it would be hard to send my 7-year-old across Route 2 by himself if there wasn't a crossing guard there. And I have been involved in a major motor vehicle accident at the Sudbury Road Route 2 intersection in a car. And so I understand people's hesitation. The Baker Avenue crossing is actually what I was referring to. I was trying to get to Barrett's Mill Road. And if you've ever tried to get from West Concord to Barrett's Mill Road without going through Concord Center, you either have to go through the Rotary, or you have to go across Baker Avenue Extension, take the sidewalk and go through the woods there. And that is not great in terms of a transportation corridor.
That
So
sounds
that's
like
what I
the
was
most-
referring to there.
Yeah, that sounds like a frightening one. Nick, I mean, there have been bicyclists killed by cars on Route 2.
No, automobile drivers.
Yeah, those I've been aware of.
Yeah.
I
I don't
mean,
know
maybe-
about bicycle. On Route 2. I don't know about that.
Well,
I don't
those
believe
little-
so. They're not in the
those-
statistics.
Those bicycling, like the walk and don't walk signs for pedestrians, the ones for bicyclists, perhaps that just has to be sequenced in so that there is a cushion of safety for cyclists, so that they're not as concerned about cars. I always wait when the light turns green there to make sure everybody's stopped before I start to go in any mode of transportation.
Yeah, I think it's something that a study and MassDOT seriously looking at it, because it's an at-grade crossing of limited access highway, a super highway, right? And MassDOT seems to think, I mean, it's almost surprising that they let it stay that way, because where else on Route 2 do you have at-grade crossings? Not in Cambridge, not in Arlington, not in Lexington.
Well, Route
Not-
2 is
not-
Route 2 is a very strange road. If you go out past near towns, past Gardner, past Westminster, where it suddenly becomes a 2-lane road, it's a very strange road.
So I'll jump in. There's a few things just for everyone's information. If everybody recalls, the Route 2 was upgraded, worked on a couple of years ago at the very beginning of the pandemic. And prior to the construction work, one of the bicyclists in town communicated with MassDOT Engineering, and at that point in time was able to get a camera-based trigger for bicyclists on Route 126. So that's Walden Street. So if you go out there and you look way across on the other side of the street, there's a camera pointing so that a cyclist can trip the light. But having similar camera-based systems wasn't included at any of the other intersections as you're heading west. I made an inquiry about a year after that and was told by the engineers that it was kind of too late to try to incorporate that into their work plan. So, it was a missed opportunity. But I think the other issue that you have with that is that that's a state jurisdiction thing. Like Mark said, I mean, it's really a MassDOT project that would be required in order to improve the grade crossing, and getting them to focus on that, I think, would require us to get some help from our legislative delegation or somebody else who's up at the state level to get them to refocus on those crossings, because we don't have any local jurisdiction.
Okay. Let's see, moving on, I guess, liaison observer comments. Terry? Here she comes.
Well, I'm completely delighted with the conversation tonight. I think it's so important for the Transportation Committee to talk with the other folks in town, like you did tonight with the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail people. I think you have a lot in common, and that meeting is at 2:15. You'll be getting the notice. And a couple other groups that I recommend that you meet with are Economic Vitality. You talked a lot tonight about businesses. I think the Concord Academy plan about Main Street, the businesses might want to talk about that, but also about the trolley. But you have a lot of things in common to talk about. And the other one that came up tonight is the 2025 Celebration Committee. You guys have a lot of really good ideas, like the Yankee bus and the trolley, that I think they really want to hear. They don't have to reinvent the wheel. They can hear from what you've learned. So I recommend that you have both of those groups at some future agendas, or at least have a liaison to go to their meetings.
Okay, thank you.
You're doing.
Okay. But no, I guess that's not for me. Anything else? No public present at the moment, so no public comments. Phil?
So just a real quickie, I wanted to mention to everyone that I participated in a meeting with Aaron, and also with Elizabeth and David Lustenheimer from the MAPC, and a representative from Acton named Kurt Kanata. And the subject of the meeting was the Neshoba Regional Greenways Group. The purpose of the meeting was to just introduce what this idea was all about, and very briefly, the idea is to have various communities talk and communicate together and amongst themselves with regard to multimodal connectivity in the region. So the communities are all of the adjacent communities to us, as well as several other communities that are heading north and west of us. I thought we had a great introductory meeting. Nothing's really happened on the ground. The purpose of the meeting was just to introduce what the concept was all about so that there'd be some information. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to send to Aaron after this meeting some material that was put together through a grant that the group was awarded, which will explain the whole thing. So I just wanted everybody to know that that happened, and there'll be follow-up over the next however many years it takes to start pulling this together. So thanks, Aaron, for coming, and appreciate it. And hopefully it was productive for you too.
Thanks, Bill.
I did have one other thing. I was wondering if we could just designate on our agenda like a time to like bring up things that we'd like to discuss just in the future, maybe at the end of the meeting. Like, are there topics that we would like to talk about in future? Like the Yankee Line bus is one that I've been thinking about for a long time.
We can set aside a time for you to bring up a topic to discuss in the future, but you
Right.
can't. You can't bring.
No, I
up-
understand that we can't have discussions
Okay.
about things, but I just mean like a place for us to verbally flag things that's, like this is coming up for me. Can we talk about this at a future meeting? And one of the topics that I wanted to flag, for instance, is I personally don't know how to flag transportation issues that I'm noticing around town. So I would love to be briefed on what systems exist right now for instance, reporting a misfiring, crossing signal, things like that. So that we know, and also so that we might make recommendations for how to improve that and get more people to be aware of that.
Now you're getting in trouble because it brings up the whole thing you started working on in the beginning, which is all the resources related to transportation, and that would be one of them, which is
Right.
Where do you report a pothole?
Right.
And the answer for that, by the way, is the same as the traffic signal. You should call Public Works.
So we actually have on the website, if you go onto the Concord website, on the left-hand side, it says report a problem or report an issue, something like that. There's a couple of different forms there. One of them is report a pothole. But that is we don't have like a general transportation one. We also have a, report another issue. So if something doesn't fall into the general, we usually get things like trees, potholes, missed trash pickup, things like that. So if it doesn't fall under one of those sort of major categories, people generally send it under the report another issue. But you can also send things.
What happens to those, Aaron? What happens to those that are other issues? Who looks at those?
That's me.
I was afraid of that.
The busiest person in Concord, of course.
So yeah, I look at those and I shoot them off to whoever needs to look at them. I'm going to be bringing some other people into that to also start looking at them.
Yes.
Especially, and I guess this is a good time. I have been offered and accepted the position of the senior planner for transportation mobility. So yay.
Wow, good for you.
So while I'm still
What about the backfilling of your existing job?
I believe that they're going to be looking to backfill it. Right now, I'm still in sort of a transition, so I'm kind of half and half doing both still, but looking forward to having, 1 or 1.5 jobs in the future. Because one's never enough.
Oh, gosh. Okay. Okay, well, good. Congratulations. It's wonderful. Wonderful to hear. Okay, I think that's it then. If there's nothing else anyone has, we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you all.
Motion to adjourn.
Second from someone?
Seconded.
No?
A roll call, Nick.
No roll call?
No, you need to do a roll call.
Okay, Phil,
Agreed.
Dan,
I agree.
Laura,
I agree.
Mark. Mark,
You're muted, Mark.
He's muted.
Sorry, yes, I agree.
and I agree too. So, okay, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Good meeting.
Thank you.
Okay,
Good
thanks,
meeting.
everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.